I am Ben, welcome to my book corner. Today we're taking a look at The Deep by Nick Cutter. This is the second Nick Cutter book that we have reviewed on this channel. The first one, way back when I first started the channel last year, was The Troop. And much like that, I have been lent this book by my friend Noah at In Between the Lines, and just like that book, we have some very different opinions about this one. I will include a link to his review above, please go check it out. As normal, we shall take a look at the story, the characters, the world building. We'll then go through some of the pros and cons and my final thoughts on this title. So if you'll pardon the pun, let's just jump straight in at the deep end. So in terms of the story, I'm going to try and stay as spoiler free as I can with this, which is surprisingly difficult. This is set in the world round about modern times, and the situation is there's a massive disease ravaging mankind which first appeared in bees, and that is called the Gets. And the Gets is a disease that causes you to forget things. So something simple like where you put your keys, something any adult that walks into a room can understand because they forget why they've gone in there. But then it gets worse because you forget your child's name, you forget what the colour red is, and eventually your body hits a point where it forgets how to breathe or how to make the heart pump and you die. And this has gone all around the world. Deep under the water, I believe near the Mariana Trench, around 8 miles down, there is a research laboratory called the Trieste, and in the Trieste are 3 doctors, Westlake, Toy, and the brother of the main character, Dr. Clayton Nelson, and they have discovered something down there. We follow the story from the point of view of Luke. Luke is a veterinarian, and he's basically been told by the UN or the US government that he has been requested by his brother, and they have recently lost contact with the station. He's then flown halfway around the world, goes out to basically the ship called the Hesperus, and is taken down to the station to find something isn't quite right down there. And what unfolds from here is a bit of a mystery box on, first of all, what is this miracle cure that they appear to have found, whether it is what it seems to be, and also what's actually been happening to the 3 scientists that are down there, because one of them appears to have gone completely insane. One has recently resurfaced at the top, showing some rather graphic and grotesque sort of mutilations on his body, and something doesn't seem quite right, and it's not clear whether it's the stress of the situation being so far down and in a place where mankind shouldn't be. And you have a running theme from here to the end of the book of almost a mental assault on Luke as his psyche slowly but surely unwinds. And this is fed into his actual history, and you have a number of flashbacks that link into things that he's beginning to see while he's hallucinating, inverted commas, while he's down here. Where this is really good is, whilst it is a reasonably basic paint-by-numbers story in many regards, there is a sheer atmosphere in this book which is actually quite hard to put into words. The use of flashbacks are also really well done to inform some of the things that happen, but I'm going to touch on that a little bit more when we get to the character beats. But I think this is actually telling a pretty interesting story personally. So in terms of the world building, it's actually pretty decent here. You very early on meet someone who's suffering from the Gets, and you clearly see what someone in sort of the later stages of this disease is like. They're pretty much just an unaware husk, just moving and bumping into things, almost like a fly just constantly bumping into the glass of a window when there's an open window there that it can just fly out of. It's also touched on the fact that bees were seen very early on, and the first animal to sort of show signs of the Gets. and how it messed up their perfectly mathematical hives and the way that they worked, and the massive impact that had as well. And obviously the implied impact because of how important honeybees are to sort of the crop cycles and everything, and the effect that that's had. And you get a sense of the stakes for how important the research is from that straight away. You then also have some world building around when you're going down to the Trieste, which is the station, and how alien everything feels. You can sense the pressure sort of closing in, the lack of light, and it's explained through the characters how alien this feels and how this very much feels like an environment that mankind doesn't belong. There's a comment here that this is a place where darkness just swallows the light. There's no place for light down here, and it's really, really well done. The Trieste as well, I'm actually going to push that into the character section, which will become clear when I get there. But the way that is written as well is really, really well done. But that's going to lead me straight into the characters. So on to characters, and while some people would argue this should go in world building, I disagree, and that is the actual station itself, the Trieste. And I'm including it in here because it is written with personality and character, whilst it's not a living, breathing thing probably. And I say probably because that's not always clear either at times, the way it's portrayed. It has such a sense and importance to the story, and such a feel to it, that I can't not put it in here as a character. It's even when you first see it in the story described as this spider-like monstrosity of odd angles that looks alien and out of place, hugging the bottom of the sea. And it's touched on how it looks like it's been pitted and dented and warped by the immense pressures of the underwater abyss that it's in. And once you're inside, how the shadows don't quite seem to fall right on the floors, and how there's odd angles everywhere, and the creaks and the hisses and the moans and the groans. And it's never clear whether it should be like this, whether this is just a natural occurrence from the environment or if there's something else at play. And it really informs the level of tension of the story, and in many ways that is the standout of this, the whole atmosphere that the station itself gives. However, that would be nothing without the other cast of characters as well. Spoilers will abound here a little bit. We'll start with Dr. Luke Nelson. He is the main character that we follow throughout the story, and he is actually quite a tragic figure, especially by the end. He is somebody who, along with his brother Clayton, who is one of the doctors down in the station to begin with, suffered abuse as children at the hands of one of their parents. And that is revisited through a number of flashbacks, and some of those are really hard to read and really, really painful. And it helps inform some of the sort of demons he has to battle in his own head throughout the whole of the story, as he has to relive some of these things, as the stresses and strains of the environment he finds himself in sort of forces these bad memories back up. On top of that, he also lost his son several years earlier whilst playing hide and seek in a park. One minute he was there, one minute he was gone, and that becomes incredibly important at the back end of the book. And you very much have a man here who has carried on with life, not too dissimilar to the people who have suffered from the Gets. He's just doing things because he's doing them now, trying to make a small difference in the world, but he's apathetic. He doesn't really care anymore. He doesn't have anything to live for. He has lost everything. And when he gets the call because his brothers apparently asked for him, he's the last one that's left, even though they've not spoken for years. Speaking of his brother Clayton, Clayton is a monster who is comfortable with the fact that they are a monster. This is the amoral scientist archetype, a person who seeks knowledge for knowledge's sake, and will do things that are unspeakable in the name of finding their goal. And he has very little redeeming quality about him, but much like his brother, you can kind of see why he's ended up like he is. On top of that, you also have Alice Sykes. She fetches people down to Trieste and takes them back up again. She's actually almost like the normal person that you have in the story, or at least the most normal. She is a submariner. She spent years working under the water in submarines and so forth, and she gives the most human element of anything to this. And you sort of really root for her and the connections she starts to form with Luke throughout the course of the story as well. There are a few other characters in here as well. Dr. Westlake and Dr. Toy both have moments, Dr. Toy in particular. You also have various animals that show up throughout this. There is a dog that has quite a lot of time in the book as kind of the emotional center in many ways for Luke as he begins to unravel. And again, all really well done, but the standout here is Luke and his descent as his psyche sort of fractures. So on to my final thoughts, and this is a little bit more complicated than it normally would be. I really do appreciate this book, although I can't say that I enjoyed it. There is a lot of stuff in here that makes me go, yes, but, and whilst I don't find that a problem, other people will be. So this book, as already mentioned, does touch on sexual and child abuse. There are flashbacks which do partially describe some of this, and one in particular I found really difficult to read. If you don't want to read about stuff like that, this isn't going to be a book for you, because again, it is a hard read and I need to specify that. However, I will also add that at no point is it gratuitous. It's not there for no reason. It does inform the character and the sort of journeys they go on. The other thing as well is this is a Nick Cutter book. Graphic body horror is in here for people and animals. If you don't want to know about body mutilation for people and animals and you don't want to read about it, this is definitely, again, not going to be a book for you. The other thing, and this is a criticism I have seen and heard from elsewhere, is that a lot of people thought that this was going to be a very different book and believed it was going to be focused on the Gets and characters sort of gradually forgetting everything and the horror that that entails, and it obviously isn't that book. The Gets is just a staging point to tell a story rather than being the story in of itself. And again, that wasn't an issue to me, but going in, just be aware that this isn't a story about the Gets. However, for me, where this book really does excel is the pure atmosphere of the environment that the story takes place in, and the way that Luke's psyche sort of fragments and falls apart throughout the period of the book, and the sheer tension from once he gets to down to the station to the end of the story where he has to make a choice. And for that reason in particular, I have to recommend this. I think this is a really good psychological horror if you know what you're going into, but it's not going to be one for everyone. So for me personally, this does sit in a B tier. There are some issues with this structurally. I just need to add, this does have the short chapter issue that the Troop had, although this becomes less of an issue later on in the book. And some of the flashbacks do appear at some rather odd times and occasionally can become a bit difficult to follow. But the atmosphere is what really makes this for me. However, have you read this or The Troop, and what did you think of them? Let me know in the comments below. I will catch you all next time.